Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Why is it tightening? So she does not obey the laws of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and I must. Last night, I was lying down sick, watching Game of Thrones for the second time, and my friend says, "Do you care about the Try Guys?" I say, "I watched them when I was a teenager. I watched them until quite recently." And then the whole thing happened. Then I asked, "Why?" And she says, "Ned Fulmer came out with a podcast with Ariel." And I said, "Let's watch." I am sat. I would like to watch. We play the video. We get through 10 minutes and I say, "Turn that off." It pissed me off in a way I did not think was possible. But then why am I surprised when a white man pisses me off? I told myself that I would watch the podcast again from beginning to end on 2x speed and formulate some thoughts. Formulate, I did. Did I gather them? No. I know it is customary to write a script, gather your thoughts, deliver. I'm simply not that girl. That is not my truth. Instead, I'm going to go through my thoughts on the video that I wrote down as I was watching it and drinking my coffee this morning. Quick little disclaimer. Everything that I am about to say is my opinion. I am not claiming that any of them are fact, other than what was said by Ned and Ariel themselves. I don't want to get sued. Please don't sue me. But I also don't think anyone's going to see this, so here we go. First, let's do a little recap, shall we, of what I know and I remember. Again, all opinion, not fact. The Try Guys came into popularity in the mid-2010s on BuzzFeed. Can I say that word? They are a group of 4 who have vastly different characters, each of them, vastly different interests, but they all got together and were good Judies, as far as I know, good friends. And they created content together for BuzzFeed before they all left, and then they created Second Try LLC, which is their own production company where they created their own videos. In 2022, I was getting ready for a final exam when a friend of mine was like, "Do you watch Try Guys?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "Ned Fulmer cheated on his wife." I was shocked. I really was, because he, oh my God, branded himself as a certified family man. Loves his wife so very much, wouldn't shut up about his marriage. And then he cheats on her publicly with one of their producers, Alexandra. It was very public. A fan took photos and sent it to Ariel herself. It got released on Reddit as well, and then it spread like wildfire. People were mad, understandably so. It was very disrespectful to Ariel and to his audience, in my opinion, because one, as far as I know, Ariel was a regular non-public figure person prior to Ned becoming popular through Try Guys fame. And as such, she was kind of brought into the fold. She had her own podcast with the other Try Wives, I believe they were called. She was in a lot of their content as well because it seemed natural for her to be, right? They are these guys with different lifestyles, and Ned was the wife guy. Ned was the family guy. And so naturally the wife was involved. That cheating scandal not only was such disrespect to Ariel, he cheated at a Harry Styles concert. My God. I don't know how that makes it worse, but it does. And he was an owner. He was one of the owners of Second Try LLC who cheated on his producer. He was in a position of power, and that does not look good. I don't know the true nature of their relationship. I don't know how consensual everything was. I don't know if there was an element of threat to her career. Granted, he was in a position of power. We can only speculate, right? And as far as I know, Alexandra has kept quite quiet about the whole situation, which is smart. What is less smart is coming back 3 years later and playing the redeeming man, the man on the path to redemption, thinking that you're gonna look good somehow. Okay, I should state very clearly right now that I do not like Ned Fulmer. I think I have a right to not like him. That's just me. He might be for other people, but he's not for me, darling. Ariel, however, I would go to war for. I would lay life and limb down if it meant one of her pottery works could get sold. There is a clear bias here. However, I am going to try my best to look at the video relatively objectively. I am going to criticize where criticism is warranted, and I will reward behavior where it's warranted. The video starts with Ned sitting down in front of the camera, and darling, that camera's exposure was turned up to 11. It was blinding. I don't know. Man, okay. I'm finding it. You've worked in media for, I think, over a decade now. Surely you know how to adjust the exposure on your camera. Maybe do a couple test runs next time. Is my exposure bad? Because if it is, no, it's not. It looks stunning. All right. It starts with him staring at the camera and telling us things that we already know. I cheated on my wife. A lot of people were affected. It became very public. That is the best tongue pop I've ever done in my life, and I don't think I'll be able to do it again. Anyway, he just spews at us. No, Safra, that's too mean. He tells us things that we already know. He says something to the effect of, I was the cause. I did that. I can own and the only thing I can do is own it and accept it. Keyword there, accept it and show up differently. One of the ways that I can show up differently is to publicly witness the pain of my partner, which is necessary for her to move forward.
And one step is to publicly witness the pain of my partner, Ariel.
He was also very clearly reading off a script, but talking at a snail's pace. Oh my God. I watched it at 2x speed and his cadence was normal. And then we see them in a podcast room. To me, it's very telling that you have thought about this over the past 3 years, clearly, and discussed it at length. Thought about what is the best image that I can put out for my return. And your idea was a pretty little set with 2 Shure mics and your poor ex-wife in the same room with you, talking about the worst time in your lives. Did I find it? I don't know. I find it a little hard to believe that angel, that sweet angel, wanted to do this. But if she did, right? Spoiler alert, she has a pottery business, and I hope to God that it thrives. If she's doing this to kind of clear her public name so that her business doesn't get affected, power to you, darling. I love that for you. If you did this under duress, we ride at dawn. The podcast is called Rock Bottom. And as far as I understand, Ned wants to share stories of people who have been through really hard times with him as the host. We'll get to that a little bit more later, but that's the context of the podcast that we are watching. The two of them have an hour-long conversation, and they both talk rather slowly. I am not part of the millennial pause police. If you need to pause, darling, pause. However, if I am going to listen to a podcast while I drive, this podcast would have put me to sleep. I would have slept at the wheel and God knows what would have happened. I'm going to go through the key points that I thought were relevant and that I have thoughts on. Firstly, about 11 minutes in, Ariel says, right? People ask me, do you forgive Ned? And she says, no, absolutely not. How do you forgive someone for lying to you, for cheating on you? No, no.
No, like, people ask me, like, do you forgive Ned for what he did? And I mean, the answer is no. absolutely not. How can you forgive somebody for lying to you, for cheating on you? No, fuck no. Like,
He looks pained by that. I shouldn't laugh at someone's pain. He looks pained by this, but she goes on to say, forgiveness isn't the goal.
sorry, I saw red for a minute. It's like, no, the answer is no. But also I feel like forgiveness isn't the goal at this point.
Mm.
You know, we've been together for a long time, and you are the father of my two beautiful children, and we know each other really well, and I you know, we worked through a lot of stuff, and the fact that I can be around you and still like have a good time and like enjoy spending time with you and enjoy spending time with my kids, like, I think that's a win.
They want to move forward, and moving forward for them and for her especially means putting the kids first, having a platonic friendship, and being good co-parents to their children, which I think is very, very admirable. She had every right to say, I want nothing to do with you. Her life was so heavily impacted by it, and she goes on to explain how, because she was under public scrutiny. There were cameras parked outside of their house. There was paparazzi. People kept talking about it. People approached them and talked about it. And she didn't ask for this.
But even like going out in public with like my kids or just going out to dinner or something like that,
Yeah.
I feel like the only thing that people see is the scandal.
Yeah. It's a big loss.
It's a big loss, but it's also a really strange way to go about your normal life. You know, like, I am a human who has needs. Like, I want to have regular friends, and I don't want to like walk up to somebody that I want to be friends with at like preschool and have to start every conversation with like, my personal life is a dumpster fire, as I'm sure you know, but also, do you want to be friends with me?
She chose to be in content with her husband and with the Try Guys and the Try Wives, etc. She had her own podcast and everything. She was thriving and she enjoyed it. She was good at it. But she did not choose for it all to go wrong. She was a victim and she was put through hell, even though she did nothing wrong. After she says, no, how could I forgive him, right? Which is, those words are heavy because it implies that she may never forgive him. And Ned says, you know, it's hard to hear F no, I don't forgive you. But that's when I started to realize that he was using a lot of we statements, not I statements. And then he goes on to say, as much progress as we've made, you're still very angry. He says that in a way that was, I guess, acknowledging, but it is, if you listen closely, there's a lot of we statements in moving forward, in accepting the past, in trying to make the best out of the situation, but you are still very angry. I'm just saying.
We're getting to a point of sort of celebrating that and really like embracing it and accepting it for what it is, as we are like grieving the past. And, you know, it's hard to hear you saying like, fuck no, I don't forgive you. But like, of course I get it. I mean, you're still, as much progress as we've had, you're still very angry.
About 16 minutes in, she says that when she saw the picture, she thought that it was his sister, which really breaks my heart because clearly she had a lot of faith in him. He picked her up from the airport. You know, she's like, what was, I don't know the sister's name. I'm not going to mention the sister's name. I don't think she wants to be included in this. But she says, you know, what was your sister doing in New York? And he looks at her with this incredibly guilty face, as they describe. And she says, turn this car around, right? Take me back to the airport, something to that effect. And she looks at him because his face was giving something away. And she asks, is that not how you remember it? And he says, that's not how I remember it, but it doesn't matter. I'm really finding it. I'm trying to find it. They go more into that later on. Hold on. Ooh. About 17 minutes in, she starts to describe how unsafe she felt. That no matter where she went, there was a camera. And we're living in such a public age where anybody could be recording you. Anybody could be taking a photo of you. And she did not feel safe anywhere with anyone other than inside. That is heartbreaking. That if she was agoraphobic for a period of time in her life, I wouldn't blame her. And being so scared of the outside world to that extent is so hard on someone's psyche, much less a mother of two. She had 2 kids to take care of, and she was scared of going outside.
And it is so wild how we live in this world where everything is so public. Like, you don't realize it, but everybody's taking pictures of you everywhere you go. And it's kind of scary, actually. And it makes you realize that whenever you leave your house, you're not safe. And then after everything happened, I sort of went into this this weird state where nothing was safe, and nothing and nobody, I couldn't trust anybody. I couldn't trust the public. I couldn't trust you. I couldn't trust my friends. I just stayed inside, because there were cameras everywhere. It was it was so unsafe. Everything was unsafe. Yeah, it took a long time to get back to myself.
She literally said nothing and nobody was safe. Leave that woman alone. She has said, if you're not going to make it to the end of this video, let this be heard. She has said that she no longer wants to be an influencer. She doesn't want to do that with her life because she wants to be authentically her, and she struggles to do that being in the public eye, which is so fair. There isn't elements of performance whenever you put something on the internet. You can't be fully yourself all the time, everywhere, all at once. And so she has taken a step back, and she wants to just create ceramics. Let her do her pottery and leave her alone. You understand? Leave her alone. Unless you want to buy something, you buy something. Otherwise leave Ariel Fulmer alone. After she describes this harrowing experience, he asks, did the scandal being public make it easier?
How did having it become such a public scandal kind of change everything for you? Did it make it worse? Did it make it easier? Did it just sort of make it surreal?
This man wants to be an interviewer. You want to be an interviewer. She just described to you at length. She just poured her heart out onto that podcast set, explaining how being public made it so much more difficult to the point where she was agoraphobic. And you dare ask that question? Clearly, your active listening skills are not quite up to par, Mr. Fulmer. She said something after when he asked that and said it was awful, right? She described how awful it was, that the trauma of everything you know or everything that you thought you knew isn't real. And then add on to that, you're being watched on camera. So she had to spell it out for this man that it sucked, Ned. It sucked. But that was not clocking to you that she was standing on business, and it had to be repeated.
It's like the trauma of discovering that everything that you know isn't real, and then add to it you're being watched by cameras, which isn't something that's a part of our lives.
About 20 minutes in, she says, we're not celebrities.
Yes, we are somewhat public figures, but we've never had cameras waiting outside of our house. That's not something that we're used to. We're not celebrities. That's not that's not a part of our lives. And this was a period in our lives where we had there was a car following us.
But here we have people following us in a different car on the way to couples therapy. She didn't know what else to do, so she smiled. And there was a video that was posted of the two of them. Oh my God, leave her alone. Leave people alone. Leave people alone. Wasn't it enough that the greatest betrayal she has experienced in her life was plastered all over the internet for the entire world to see? But you have to follow her? Y'all are messed up for that. At this point, I'm starting to understand that Ned, as of this video, does not possess the interviewing skills needed, or in fact, the public speaking skills required to carry a show. He was only as successful as he was because he was bolstered by 3 other men who, I don't know how Eugene identifies, by 3 other people who brought him his success. He would not have reached the notoriety, in my opinion, that he did had it not been for the Try Guys as a whole. Because he says something to the effect of, what was that moment like for you? The moment that she found out, what was that moment like for you?
What was that moment like when everything changed for you?
Awful, obviously.
She's already described it multiple times. And you continue to ask. And she says, yeah, I asked you why your sister was in New York. She saw his guilt. I'm reading off of my notes. She saw his guilt, this wildly guilty look. And she said, turn this car around. And he says, I don't remember it happening like that, but it doesn't matter. Her face in that moment, oh my God.
Just naively looked over to you in the driver's seat, and I was like, why was Grace in New York? Like, I didn't realize Grace was in New York. Why was she, referring to that picture that I had sent to you? And you looked over at me with this look on your face, and it was like the veil just fell, like this. Like I knew in my brain that something was going on, but I just sort of refused to believe it. And then when I saw that, like, just wildly guilty look on your face, like you wanted to tell me something, and I didn't even let you say anything. I was like, turn this car around. You don't remember that?
No, I don't remember it happening like that, but it doesn't matter.
How do you remember it happening?
In my opinion, it looked like she wanted to strangle him. It really did. And I would not have blamed her if she put her fingers around that man's throat. According to him, oh! So there was this part where she was describing how she did not know how to process it in that moment in time. And she was thinking if this were a movie, what would the character say? And to me, that meant she truly did not understand how to process it at that moment. But he took it as, she thought she was in a movie? Was she being dramatic? That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
I thought to myself, like, what would somebody who's been cheated on, like, what would somebody in a movie do?
Really?
I wasn't thinking, like, of a specific movie or something like that. I was thinking, like, what would, like, what do people do in this situation?
Because he claims that she didn't straight away tell him to turn the car around. She asked him follow-up questions.
Oh, I mean, you asked me a couple of different follow-up questions as I just sort of answered them. And then, once I, answered it in such a way that you knew exactly who it was and what had happened, then you were like taking me back to the airport.
And he says, I guess that part was cinematic.
Yeah.
That part was very cinematic, if you were trying to be like in a movie.
Turn this fucking car around.
As if like she was trying to be in a movie. At this point, I no longer want to find it. It's so clear to me, and this is about 27 minutes in, that he is looking for redemption. He wants to be redeemed. And in his, for him, it's like, oh no, I remember it this way because when you make such a big mistake, you come up with delusions and rationalizations to make that mistake or to make that wrongdoing not seem so bad. Cool. Yeah, that's a fairly good reflection. And it's good that he didn't reinstate and put his foot down and say, no, that's not what happened, because he acknowledges that it could have happened differently. Right? Good for you, Ned.
I think there's a lot of sort of delusions and rationalizations that you, as the person doing that, sort of are telling yourself as to why it's not so bad, or why it's going to be okay, or why actually this talks about it in this way.
But then, right? So he says one. He says one redeeming thing, and in the next breath says, it was after seeing her being traumatized by that when everything changed and it dawned on him that what he did was wrong. And then there's a pause. And that pause was pregnant with triplets. It was so long. And then she says, you didn't realize till then?
And then it's like, I remember that moment, it all just kind of like fell down, where I totally could see how devastated and just completely traumatized you were. And then it was just like, oh, everything changed for me as well. I'm like, oh no, this is like, I've been hurting this person that I love this whole time.
You didn't Realize until then.
Well, you know, but then there's other
Because how awful do you have to be as a person to betray your wife and your family in such a way and only realize how bad it was when she found out? How? We're waiting. Ned, how did you only realize it then? And then he doubles back, right? He retcons. He's like, you know, you lied to yourself, and then yeah. And he asks, is that hard for you to hear?
things you tell yourself to kind of sort of compartmentalize, or I guess.
Interesting.
It's sort of a, you know, it's like a addictive cycle, kind of feeling really guilty and ashamed, and then telling yourself the ways in which it's, you know, kind of just lying to yourself, and then, yeah. And I did want to tell you, and there was probably a small part of me that was sort of relieved to not be keeping a secret, I guess. Is that hard for you to hear?
Is that hard for you to hear? What do you think, Mr. Fulmer? What do you think? What what do you think? What do you think? After this, Ariel explains so beautifully, like so eloquently, how a lot of people, because she talked to other people who had been betrayed by their partner, she explains how there's a sense of relief that comes to the traitor after they have revealed their wrongdoing to the betrayed. And that there's a sense of release because that shame and that guilt gets put onto the betrayed. And they have to accept it. That's the dynamic that can happen in these kind of situations. And she says, I was the victim, but I had to accept your guilt and shame. At this point, about 33 minutes in, I felt like I shouldn't be watching this, right? Because this is a very intimate and very raw conversation between two people who had known each other since they were kids, like early 20s, maybe even younger than that. So she says that she explained that it was harrowing, right? In her own words. And he responds with, it's not fair that society put you in that position.
That like not only did you having an affair just it shattered our marriage, but it also, like, all of that guilt and shame, you like hoisted that on me. Like, you gave that to me. Now I have to carry that around for the rest of my life.
I don't think it's fair that as a society you're put in that position. It's certainly not true.
It's not fair that society put you in that position when it's not true. And I'm thinking, what's not true? What about what she said was not true? What do you mean? Because clearly you are processing what she said wrong. She just said what she experienced, and you said it's not true. And he says, oh my God. He says, it's not what I imagined when doing that. Like, how could you do that? There's nothing I can do to help. Own up to the fact that what you did was a mistake and do better. That's all you can do. Don't spew lies or make promises that you may not be able to keep. Admit what you did was messed up and be better. It was, I believe, the character in God of War. Yes, I'm quoting a video game. It was from the second God of War game where he says, don't be sorry, be better. Don't be sorry, be better. And I have taken that with me through my life. Because as humans, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to do things wrong, whether you intend to or not. I don't know what his intentions were, nor do I want to know, truly. But if you have done something wrong to this angel of a woman, admit you were wrong and do better. And about 36 minutes in, she starts to describe how she thought that she had this love that was everything she ever dreamed of, but it was a fantasy. They got married in their early 20s. They were babies. They had nothing. When this happened, she thought to herself, who are you? Who is this man? Because the betrayal was so potent. It was finally at this point, about 38 minutes in, that he says, I'm sorry to her. That was the first time that I heard the words, I'm sorry to her. I'm sure he said it many times before, but this is the first I'm saying it, right? So took you a bit of time there, darling. And according to him, the reason that he made the decisions that he did was because the dream of what he thought his life would be broke apart. And instead of dealing with those issues, and instead of talking about it with his wife, he chose to run away from it, and he chose self-destruction. And then goes on to say that he's so deeply sorry and he will spend the rest of his life trying to make it right, blah, blah, blah. I don't care what you say. I just want to, and honestly, I don't have to care what he says or does. The only thing that should matter is what you do, not what you say, but what you do to make things right by her. I don't know if Mr. Fulmer is watching this or if he in fact got this far, but we don't need to hear it. You just need to be a better person to Ariel. 40 minutes into the talk, they start talking about how they move forward, right? So when did things change and for the better for Ariel? And it was when she started building authentic relationships with people. Where she finally started feeling safe was when people didn't care about the scandal, when she started meeting people in the real world. But she made friends, she started dating, and people just genuinely didn't care. And that was so freeing for her because she didn't have to be attached to this huge scandal. She could just be herself, right? She started to accept the fact that it's okay to live in a world where people know. From what I can see, she has truly accepted what happened and is moving forward the best that she can. Of course, she acknowledges that she has bad days. She has days where she hates him. But that acceptance has pushed her forward. So at this point in their life, they are approaching their relationship as platonic partners for their kids. They just want to be good co-parents, and they have a sort of friendship with each other, which is fair. They've known each other for 20 years. It's I'm sure very hard to just drop him like a hot pocket. So she's trying to make the most out of it, even though she has every right to say, nope, she didn't say this, right? But she has every right to, if she wanted to say, you ruined my life. I'm taking the kids and I'm bouncing and I'm going to live a wonderful, fulfilling life. But she didn't, for her kids and for herself, perhaps. She did what she had to do to fix the relationship in whatever way worked for her and move forward, which I really commend her for. Here's another point where I can commend Ned for his awareness. He says, he understands why these type of scandals are ignition points and people have strong feelings about it.
I understand why, broadly speaking, these like scandals are such ignition points, because it's a lot of people can relate to it and a lot of people feel so much pain around it.
Who hasn't been cheated on? Cheating is very big, right? Especially in hetero relationships. Cheating is one of the greatest forms of betrayal you can do to a partner. And he recognizes why it became as big as it did and why people were angry. Do I think he came up with this himself? No comment. About 50 minutes in, I almost cried because she said that, there are days where I hate your guts and there are days where I enjoy your company more than not. And she says that, it's for her wonderful, beautiful kids. They are worth every cent of therapy that they paid for. And I thought, she's just so strong and so kind. And from what it sounds like, a really good mom. Then after this, so she just had this beautiful moment where she says this and he says, yeah, now we're trying to rebuild. And she goes, no. She goes, I don't think we're rebuilding. I think we're building something new. And he says, yeah, because the past is no longer. And she says, yeah, burn that to the ground. And I was like, you go, girl. And he has the gall to say, my wife.
That's like a big reason why we're working so hard to rebuild.
I don't even know if I would call it rebuilding. I think we're building something new.
Yeah, for sure. I think you have to view it like that. The past is no longer.
Oh, burn that shit to the ground. I'm kidding.
My wife.
You know what I'm going to do? Here's what I'm going to do. To Ariel Fulmer, I offer my services. I will shield your back and keep your counsel and give my life for yours if need be. I swear it by the old gods and new. If you ever need, darling, I will be in the front lines. I will be in the vanguard, and I will let out the fiercest battle cry in your honor. In terms of being public facing, right? She described, I think I mentioned this before, how she wanted to be one whole person. She doesn't want to be an actor because being an influencer, it's hard. And I can see how it's hard to be yourself authentically all the time. Because, as I said, there's a sense of performance when you are making content. At the end of the day, you are making something for people to be entertained by. Then, yeah, you have to kind of put a bit of a performance on. And she just doesn't want to be that. Because, especially when influencing, if you are not yourself, then you're seen as a liar. And Ned expands on this and says that, the internet tends to want you to be a one-dimensional person. She asks him to expand further, and he says that he feels like he was pigeonholed to be the family guy, that's what audiences responded to. That's when he got engagement. That's what producers liked. I understand that, but you still have a choice.
There's if you make TikToks as like a certain persona or doing a certain joke, if you deviate from that joke, oftentimes your like engagement will plummet. Like people kind of want to like just see, it's like, oh, it's like you're a stereotype. You're kind of like that person, and I guess I noticed that in my own work. It's like the things that consistently drew people in were adorable family posts or talking about my wife, and then producers lean into that and like craft situations for me. And I don't know, over time, I felt super pigeonholed and just like I had to fulfill this one like quadrant in a foursome to just be this like kind of caricature.
You're like put in a box.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to like be a full person with nuance on the internet. There's always sort of a performance layer.
Sure, people may only want to see that, and people may only want you that way, but you have a choice to still be that way or not. If you wanted to be a more holistic person on the internet, you could have done that. You just wouldn't have made as much money. So now he has a desire to create, but not as himself. So what is this?
As time has moved on, I have a desire to create and to tell stories, but I don't really want it to be about myself as a character or myself or my relationship or my personal life. I've always been drawn to things that make people curious and finding ways of connecting people with their interests. And
he says, I didn't feel creative for so long, and now I want to create, but it doesn't have to be me. I feel like instead of like, I guess him being a character, he wants to be a host, and he wants to have a space where people can talk about their difficulties, and he help people to tell their stories.
I don't know, I see myself more as like a host and more as just a vehicle for other people's stories. And I don't know, maybe I can, because of what I've gone through and my past, like connect with people and empathize with people. What?
And her face gives something away at this point. And he's like, what? And she says,
I don't know, I'm just you think you're interesting enough?
Gag! Oh my god, I was gagged. Oh my god. Drag him. Because he's not. He's not. And she knows it. And we know it. He explains further and he says, I want to make stuff where people can learn things and empathize. But the thing is, if in my opinion, if this is what he truly wishes, right? Which is to still create, not as himself, and give a platform for people to share their difficulties so that people can learn to empathize and learn new things about people, you would just produce the podcast. You have money, I'm sure. Clearly, you do. So you could have put money into it, found a professional who can talk to people about these things because you want people to talk about their trauma. In this room with you? No. If it was truly about what you're saying it is, you wouldn't be in front of the camera. That's just my opinion. So, as they sort of round things up towards the end, this is when they actually talked about the hard-hitting questions that everyone is kind of thinking about, which is, when did he hit rock bottom? And it was when she sent him a message saying, we can't get past this. That was when he realized that, he has ruined his marriage pretty much forever. And then they go on to say that they are not together anymore. They live separately. They are both seeing other people. They're both open to dating. She won't be returning to podcasting, or she's not going to be a solo artist. She has started, as I have mentioned before, a pottery business where she just enjoys going into her little studio and creating things that are sometimes good and sometimes bad. She enjoys making things for herself, purely for herself, without recording it, without showing it to anyone. And that is fantastic. She also talks about how she's turning 40 this year, and she feels that there is a standard of beauty on the internet, which there is, that she would feel pressured to abide by. But she wants to be who she is, authentically herself, and she wants to look in the mirror and say, hell yeah. And you should, darling. You are beautiful. Like, actually, I think that she's a very attractive woman. But my opinion doesn't matter. Only hers does. This made me kind of have a tangential reflection on Pamela Anderson and how she has come a long way since being since gaining notoriety at such a young age for very specific reasons. And how wrong she was done dirty, but that was the early 2000s, and it was a rough time for people in general, but women especially. And how she has chosen to not wear makeup anymore, and she's embracing her natural self, and she's stunning. But the thing is, that was her choice from the beginning to the end. It was her choice to be in public media. And it's her choice to be in public media as herself with her bare face. And that's great for her. Ariel is choosing to do something different, and that's great for her as well. About an hour and 4 minutes in, he asks, what can I do moving forward? Ask that off camera. Ask that off camera. If this is about witnessing her pain publicly, we don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear you ask that question, and we don't need to listen to her answer. She has already talked about her pain. But Ariel, being the angel that she is, says, be authentic. Be authentic. I want you to be authentically yourself, and I want to be authentically me. And that, to me, says a lot about who Ned is and who Ned pretends to be. And all she wants is to have a healthy co-parenting relationship, raise her beautiful children, make her beautiful little ceramics. Sorry, I got a little emotional. All this is to say, leave that woman alone. Buy her pottery if you can. Otherwise, leave her alone. Okay. Bye.